The cafe was packed when Harper Vale pushed through the door on crutches, her prosthetic leg visible beneath worn jeans, searching desperately for an empty seat. Most people looked away uncomfortable, but then she spotted a table by the window where a black man sat with his young daughter. With her last ounce of courage, Harper asked if she could share their table, not knowing that this kind stranger was fighting his own custody battle, or that her dangerous past would pull him into a world of corporate conspiracies and criminal enforcers. And neither of them knew that the man watching through the window with a snake tattoo on his neck had been hunting Harper for 3 years, waiting for this exact moment. Just before we get back to it, I'd love to know where you're watching from today, and if you're enjoying these stories, make sure you're subscribed. The morning sun filtered through the windows of Rosie's family cafe, casting warm golden patches across the checkered floor. The smell of fresh coffee and cinnamon rolls filled the air, mixing with the cheerful chatter of weekend breakfast crowds. At a corner booth near the window, Derek Coleman sat across from his 7-year-old daughter Layla, watching her small fingers carefully sketch clouds on a paper napkin. "What kind of clouds are those, baby girl?" Derek asked, leaning forward with genuine interest. Layla didn't look up from her drawing. "Cumulus. The puffy ones. Mrs. Henderson taught us about them in science class." "That's my smart girl." Derek smiled and took a sip of his coffee. "So, tell me about your week. Did you finish that book report on Charlotte's Web?" "Uh-huh. I got a gold star." Layla finally looked up, her brown eyes bright with pride. "I wrote about how Charlotte was brave even when she was scared." Derek felt his chest tighten with love and pain at once. Brave even when scared. That had been his life for the past year, fighting to keep custody of Layla after his ex-wife Melissa decided she wanted their daughter back full-time. Every week felt like walking on glass, wondering if he was doing enough, being enough. "That's beautiful, Lai." Charlotte was definitely brave. The cafe door chimed, and Derek glanced up out of habit. The cheerful noise of the restaurant seemed to pause for just a moment as a young woman stepped inside. She moved slowly on crutches, her blonde hair pulled back in a messy ponytail. Derek noticed immediately what made people stare. Her left leg ended just below the knee, replaced by a sleek black prosthetic that caught the morning light. The woman scanned the crowded cafe with growing panic in her eyes. Every table was full. Families squeezed into booths, couples shared small tables. Even the counter seats were taken. She stood near the door, looking lost and exhausted, her shoulders slumping as if the weight of the world pressed down on them. Layla noticed her too. "Daddy, that lady needs a seat." "I see her, baby." The young woman shifted her weight, adjusting her crutches. Her skin was pale, almost translucent in the bright morning light, and dark circles shadowed her eyes. She looked like she hadn't slept in days, maybe weeks. There was something fragile about her despite the determined set of her jaw. After another moment of hesitation, she began moving toward their table. Her steps were careful, measured, as if each movement required intense concentration. When she reached their booth, she stopped and looked down at Derek with startling blue eyes that seemed to hold both hope and fear. "Can I share this table?" Her voice trembled slightly, though she tried to mask it with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. Derek felt something stir in his chest. Not attraction exactly, but recognition. This was a person who knew what it meant to carry burdens alone. He glanced at Layla, who was already nodding enthusiastically. "Of course," Derek said, gesturing to the empty side of the booth. "Please sit down." Relief washed over the young woman's face. "Thank you. Really, I appreciate it." She began to maneuver herself into the booth, leaning her crutches against the wall. As she shifted her weight to sit, one crutch slipped, falling with a clatter. She lurched forward, losing her balance completely. Derek moved without thinking, reaching across the table to catch her arm and steady her before she could fall. His hands were gentle but firm, and for a moment they locked eyes, hers wide with embarrassment, his calm and understanding. "I've got you," he said quietly. The woman quickly regained her footing and slid into the booth, her cheeks flushed pink. "Thanks. I'm having a rough morning." She laughed, but it sounded hollow. "A rough few months, actually." Derek returned to his seat, studying her more carefully now, Beyond the obvious exhaustion, there was something else. When she had grabbed the edge of the table to steady herself, her sleeve had ridden up slightly. Derek caught a glimpse of bruises on her forearm. Old ones, yellowing at the edges, the kind that came from rough handling. "You okay?" he asked gently. "Fine. Just clumsy." She pulled her sleeve down quickly and picked up a menu, though her hands trembled slightly as she held it. Layla, who had been quietly observing everything, tilted her head with the innocent curiosity only a child could manage. "What happened to your leg?" "Layla," Derek said softly, a gentle warning in his tone. But the woman smiled, and this time it seemed more genuine. "It's okay. Kids are curious." She looked at Layla with warm eyes. "I was in an accident. A long story." "Did it hurt?" Layla asked. "Very much, but I'm getting better every day." Derek watched the woman's face as she spoke. Her smile was kind, but her eyes flickered with something darker, a shadow of a memory she didn't want to revisit. She was lying, he realized, not about the pain, but about the accident itself. Whatever had happened to her leg, it wasn't as simple as she made it sound. "I'm Derek, by the way. This is my daughter, Layla." "Harper," the woman said. "Harper Vale." They fell into an awkward, but not uncomfortable silence. Harper studied the menu, while Layla went back to drawing clouds. Derek sipped his coffee and tried not to stare, but he couldn't shake the feeling that this woman was running from something terrible. Layla suddenly looked up from her napkin and pointed toward the window. "Daddy, that man is staring at us." Derek turned to look. Across the street, partially hidden in the shadow of a building, stood a man in a gray hoodie. He wasn't looking at the cafe in general. He was staring directly through the window, his gaze fixed and intense. Harper followed their eyes, and the color drained from her already pale face. Her hand shot out and gripped the edge of the table so hard her knuckles turned white. She stared at the man with the kind of terror that came from deep, personal experience. "Do you know him?" Derek asked carefully. Harper tore her eyes away from the window and shook her head too quickly. "No, I don't know him." But Derek could see the lie written all over her face. She knew exactly who that man was, and she was terrified of him. The man in the hoodie stood motionless for another long moment, then turned and disappeared around the corner. Harper exhaled shakily, her whole body trembling. Before Derek could say anything, Harper's phone began vibrating on the table. Once, twice, 3 times in quick succession. She flipped it over so the screen faced down, but not before Derek caught a glimpse of the name. Mason. The phone continued to buzz insistently. Harper ignored it, wrapping her arms around herself as if she could physically hold herself together. "Are you in some kind of trouble?" Derek asked quietly, leaning forward so Layla wouldn't hear. Harper forced another laugh. "No, I'm Fine. Just an old friend who doesn't know when to quit." "Harper, really, I'm okay." She looked him in the eyes, and Derek saw desperation there. "Please don't ask me more," her expression seemed to say. "Please don't make me explain." Derek wanted to press, but he also understood boundaries. He had his own secrets, his own battles. So instead, he simply nodded and changed the subject, asking about the weather, about the cafe's menu, about nothing important. As they talked, Harper seemed to relax slightly, though her phone continued to vibrate intermittently. Each time it did, she flinched just a little. At one point, Harper's gaze drifted to Derek's backpack, sitting on the bench beside him. A folded piece of paper stuck out from the front pocket, official-looking, with bold lettering visible at the top. Before Derek could tuck it away, Harper read enough to see the words family court and custody hearing. Her expression softened with understanding. "You're fighting for her," she said quietly, glancing at Layla. Derek's jaw tightened. "Every day. Then you're a good father." "I'm trying to be." Something passed between them in that moment. An unspoken recognition that they were both warriors in their own battles, both barely holding on, both pretending to be stronger than they felt. When the waitress came to take Harper's order, she asked for just coffee. But when she tried to pay for it later, her card declined. She tried again. Declined. Her face flushed with humiliation. "I'm sorry, I thought I had." "Don't worry about it," Derek said quickly, handing the waitress his own card. "It's on me. You don't have to." "I know I don't have to." but I want to. Harper's eyes filled with tears that she blinked back furiously. Thank you, she whispered. You have no idea how much that means. No one's been kind to me in a very long time. When they finished eating, Harper carefully gathered her crutches and prepared to leave. Derek helped her stand, and, as she steadied herself, she looked at him with an intensity that made him pause. Derek, she said quietly, her voice barely audible over the cafe noise. Please don't involve yourself in my problems. You seem like a good man with a beautiful daughter. You don't want to know who you'd be dealing with. Before Derek could respond, Harper turned and moved toward the door faster than she probably should have, her crutches clicking against the tile floor. She pushed through the exit and disappeared into the morning crowds. Layla watched her go, then looked up at her father with big, thoughtful eyes. Is she going to be okay, Daddy? Derek stared at the door for a long moment. That man in the hoodie, the bruises, the terror in Harper's eyes, the threatening phone calls from someone named Mason. I don't know, baby girl, he said honestly, but I think we're going to see her again. And he was right. Over the next few days, Derek couldn't shake Harper from his mind. He found himself looking for her in crowds, wondering if she was safe, hoping she had found somewhere stable to stay. But it was something else that truly unsettled him, the man in the gray hoodie. Derek saw him again on Tuesday afternoon, standing across the street from Layla's elementary school. The man leaned against a lamppost, hands in his pockets, watching the stream of children being picked up by their parents. He wasn't looking at Layla specifically, but scanning the crowd with the focused attention of someone searching for a particular face. Derek's protective instincts flared. He walked Layla to the car quickly, keeping himself between her and the stranger. When he looked back, the man was gone. On Thursday, Derek spotted him again, this time outside the grocery store. The same gray hoodie, the same watchful stance. Derek felt the hair on the back of his neck stand up. This wasn't coincidence. Someone was hunting for Harper, and they were doing it in places Derek frequented. Friday afternoon, everything changed. Derek and Layla stood at the bus stop near their apartment building, waiting for the crosstown bus to take them to the library. Layla hummed to herself, swinging her backpack, oblivious to her father's growing tension. Then Derek heard it, the rapid, uneven sound of someone moving fast on crutches. He turned and saw Harper hurrying toward down the sidewalk. Her face was flushed, her hair disheveled, and her eyes were wild with panic. Derek, she gasped when she reached them, nearly collapsing against the bus stop shelter. I didn't know where else to go. She was breathing hard, looking over her shoulder every few seconds, as if expecting someone to appear behind her at any moment. Her hand shook so badly she could barely hold her crutches steady. Harper, what's wrong? Derek stepped closer, instinctively positioning himself so he could see both her and the street. I need. She couldn't form complete sentences. Fear had stolen her words. Layla tugged on Derek's sleeve. Daddy, she needs help. Derek made a decision. Come with us. You can rest at our place. Harper looked like she wanted to refuse, but exhaustion and terror won out. She nodded weakly, and Derek hailed a cab instead of waiting for the bus. 20 minutes later, they were climbing the stairs to his modest third-floor apartment. Inside, Derek guided Harper to the couch. She sank into it gratefully, her whole body trembling. Layla brought her a glass of water without being asked, and Harper accepted it with shaking hands. Thank you, she whispered. I'm sorry to impose like this. You're not imposing, Derek said firmly. But Harper, I need to know what's happening. Who's after you? Before she could answer, the sound of a motorcycle roared past outside. Harper's glass slipped from her hands, water spilling across her lap. She shot to her feet, gasping for air, her eyes unfocused. No, she muttered, backing toward the wall. Harper, look at me. Derek moved slowly, keeping his voice calm and steady. Look at me. You're safe here. That bike is already gone. You're safe. Harper's breathing came in short, rapid bursts. A panic attack, Derek realized. He had seen this before in his cousin who had served overseas. Breathe with me, he said gently. In through your nose. Hold it. Out through your mouth. He demonstrated, exaggerating his breathing so she could follow. Slowly, painfully, Harper's breathing began to sync with his. It took several minutes, but eventually her panic subsided enough for her to speak. "I'm sorry," she whispered, sliding down the wall to sit on the floor. "I'm so pathetic." "You're not pathetic. You're scared. There's a difference." Harper looked up at him with eyes full of tears. "Most people treat me like a burden, like I'm too broken to deal with. Then most people are idiots." A small, surprised laugh escaped her. It was the first genuine sound of happiness Derek had heard from her. As Harper settled on the couch again, Derek noticed something. When she had shifted position, her shirt had ridden up slightly, revealing a glimpse of her hip. There were scars there, surgical scars, but not the kind that matched a typical amputation. These were different, more extensive, as if something had been removed beyond just the leg itself. Harper caught him looking and quickly pulled her shirt down. It wasn't a car accident, Derek thought, but didn't say aloud. Whatever had happened to her was far worse than she was letting on. The doorbell rang, making everyone jump. Derek checked the peephole and saw his sister Tiana standing in the hallway, grocery bags in hand. He had forgotten she was stopping by. Tiana took one look at Harper, sitting on the couch, and her expression turned to stone. After Derek explained that Harper needed a place to rest for a while, Tiana pulled him into the kitchen. "Are you out of your mind?" she hissed, keeping her voice low. "You bring a stranger into your home with Layla here?" She needed help, Tiana. People show up broken for a reason, Derek. Sometimes they break other people too. Tiana glanced toward the living room. "You're in the middle of a custody battle. Melissa would love to hear about this. I'm not going to turn away someone in trouble, even if it costs you your daughter." The words hit Derek like a punch. Tiana saw she had struck a nerve and softened slightly. "I know you want to help, Dee, but you have to be smart. You can't save everyone." After Tiana left, still disapproving, but at least not openly hostile, Derek returned to the living room. Harper had fallen asleep on the couch, exhausted beyond endurance. Layla sat in the armchair, still sketching clouds. "Daddy," she whispered, "can I tell you something?" "Of course, baby girl." That first day at the cafe, when I went to the bathroom, Harper was there. She was crying. Derek felt his chest tighten. What was she saying? She kept whispering the same thing over and over. "I can't run anymore. I can't run anymore." Derek looked at Harper's sleeping form. This young woman who had been running for so long, she had literally collapsed from exhaustion. Whatever she was running from, it had chased her to the breaking point. Later that evening, as Derek prepared dinner, Harper's purse fell from the couch, spilling its contents across the floor. Derek moved to help her pick everything up and stop cold. 2 phones lay on the carpet. One was a normal smartphone with a pink case. The other was clearly a burner phone, cheap, nondescript, the kind people used when they didn't want to be traced. Harper was still asleep. Derek hesitated for only a moment before quietly pocketing the burner phone. If she was in danger, he needed to understand what they were dealing with. He went into his bedroom and turned on the phone. There were dozens of missed calls from a single unsaved number. As Derek stared at the screen, the phone began to ring. He answered without speaking. "You're late again," a man's voice snarled on the other end. The voice was rough, angry, threatening. "If you don't bring it tonight, I swear to God." Derek hung up immediately, his heart pounding. Harper wasn't just in trouble. She was tangled up in something dangerous, something criminal. He returned to the living room and gently shook Harper awake. She blinked up at him, disoriented. "We need to talk," Derek said quietly. Harper sat up slowly, realizing what had happened when she saw the burner phone in his hand. Her face crumpled. "Harper, what's going on?" For a long moment, she said nothing. Then finally the dam broke. Tears streamed down her face as words tumbled out between sobs. "I tried to leave him. I did. But I can't. He'll hurt my sister." Derek sat beside her, his voice gentle. "Who will hurt your sister?" "Mason, the man who's been calling. I have a younger sister, Emma. She's only 16. When I tried to run the first time, he found her. He sent me pictures of her walking home from school. He knows where she lives, what classes she takes, everything." Harper's voice broke. "If I don't do what he says, he'll hurt her. And it'll be my fault. What does he want from you?" Harper shook her head violently. "I can't tell you. The more you know, the more danger you're in. Please, Derek, you've already done so much. Just let me rest tonight, and I'll leave in the morning." "No." Harper looked up, surprised. Derek met her eyes with unwavering intensity. Harper, you're not alone anymore. Whatever this is, we'll figure out together. But you have to trust me. Harper stared at him for a long moment, searching his face for any sign of deception or hidden motive. All she found was genuine concern and determination. Why? She whispered. Why would you help me? Because you need help. And because I think underneath all this fear, you're a lot stronger than you believe. Harper broke down completely then, sobbing in her hands. Derek sat beside her, not touching her but present, letting her release months of accumulated terror and pain. When her tears finally slowed, she looked at him with red, swollen eyes. You don't understand what you're offering. These people are dangerous. Then it's a good thing I'm stubborn. Despite everything, Harper smiled weakly. For the first time in months, she felt something she had almost forgotten: hope. But neither of them realized the cost of that hope. Derek's custody battle was about to get much worse, and Mason Crowder was much closer than either of them imagined. Outside the apartment building, hidden in the shadows across the street, a figure in a gray hoodie watched Derek's window with cold, calculating eyes. The hunt was almost over. The night Harper broke down in his living room, Derek Coleman couldn't sleep. He lay awake staring at the ceiling, thinking about the terror in her eyes, the burner phone, the threatening voice on the other end. Mason Crowder. That name echoed in his mind like a warning bell. At 3 a.m, Derek gave up on sleep. He crept into his small home office and opened his laptop, the glow illuminating his tired face. He typed Mason Crowder into the search bar and began digging. What he found made his blood run cold. Mason Crowder's name appeared in buried news articles, court documents sealed and unsealed, and obscure medical journals. He was connected to a scandal involving illegal medical trials, experimental prosthetics testing done without proper consent. The deeper Derek dug, the darker it became. Insurance fraud, hush money payments, patients who had suffered complications and then mysteriously dropped their lawsuits. One article mentioned a pharmaceutical company called BioSync Medical that had been investigated 3 years ago for unethical practices. The investigation had been dropped abruptly when key witnesses refused to testify. Mason Crowder had been listed as a consultant for the company. Derek sat back in his chair, his mind racing. Harper hadn't been in an accident. She had been silenced. The amputation wasn't the result of trauma. It was deliberate. They had taken her leg to keep her quiet about something she had discovered. He printed several articles and tucked them into a folder. When dawn finally broke, Derek heard movement in the living room. Harper was awake, sitting on the couch with her prosthetic leg removed, massaging the scarred skin of her residual limb. Couldn't sleep either? She asked quietly. Not really. Derek sat in the armchair across from her. Harper, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me. She looked up warily. Okay, was it really an accident? Harper's hands stilled. For a long moment, she didn't speak. Then, slowly, she shook her head. No, it wasn't an accident. Before they could continue, Derek's phone rang. An unknown number. He answered cautiously. Mr. Coleman? A smooth, confident male voice came through. My name is Russell Vale. I believe you've been spending time with my daughter. Derek's eyes shot to Harper, who had gone completely white. She mouthed the words, my father, with a mixture of shock and terror. What do you want? Derek asked carefully. I want to make amends with Harper. I understand she's been through a difficult time, and I'd like to help her. Could you put her on the phone? She doesn't want to talk to you. Mr. Coleman, I don't think you understand the situation. Harper is mentally unstable. She's been making wild accusations about people trying to hurt her. As her father, I'm concerned for her well-being and the well-being of anyone she might involve in her delusions. Derek heard the threat beneath the polite words. Harper is safe here, and she's not delusional. I see. Russell's voice cooled by several degrees. Then you're choosing to involve yourself in a very complicated family matter. I hope you understand the consequences of that choice, especially given your own legal situation. The line went dead. Derek lowered the phone, his jaw tight. He knows about the custody hearing, Harper whispered. He's going to use this against you. Let him try. Over the next few days, an uneasy routine developed. Harper stayed at Derek's apartment, sleeping on the couch, helping Layla with her homework, slowly beginning to trust that she might actually be safe. But the fear never fully left her eyes. One afternoon, while Derek was at work and Harper was alone with Layla, the little girl was drawing at the kitchen table. She had moved beyond clouds and was now sketching people. "Can I show you something?" Layla asked Harper. "Of course, sweetheart." Layla held up her drawing. It showed a man in a hooded sweatshirt, his face partially hidden, but one detail rendered with surprising accuracy. A tattoo on his neck, intricate and distinctive, like a snake coiled around a dagger. Harper's breath caught in her throat. "Layla, where did you see this man?" "At the café. He was outside the window, remember? And I saw him again near my school." Harper stared at the tattoo in the drawing. She knew that mark. It belonged to one of Mason's enforcers, a man named Derek who did Mason's dirtiest work. If he was watching Layla's school, it meant Mason knew exactly where Harper was hiding. When Derek came home that evening, Harper showed him the drawing. His expression darkened. "We need to talk," he said. "Really talk. No more half-truths." They waited until Layla was asleep. Then, sitting across from each other at the kitchen table with mugs of untouched coffee between them, Harper finally told him everything. 3 years ago, I worked as a junior analyst for my father's company, Vale Industries. We manufactured medical devices, prosthetics, implants, surgical equipment. I loved the work. I thought we were helping people. Harper's voice was steady, but her hands trembled around her mug. One day, I was filing reports, and I noticed discrepancies in our trial data. Patients who were supposed to be recovering were actually experiencing severe complications. But the official reports showed success rates that didn't match the raw data. "What kind of complications?" Derek asked. "Infections, nerve damage, chronic pain. Some people lost more of their limbs than they started with. Others died." Harper's eyes filled with tears. "I started digging deeper. I found evidence that the company was running unauthorized trials, using patients who couldn't afford proper medical care as test subjects. They'd offer free prosthetics in exchange for participating in experimental procedures." Derek felt sick. "Your father knew?" "Not at first. Or at least, that's what I told myself. I brought the evidence to him, expecting him to shut it down immediately. But instead, he told me I was mistaken. He said I didn't understand the complexity of medical research. He ordered me to drop it. But you didn't." Harper shook her head. "I couldn't. People were being hurt. So I made copies of everything, trial data, financial records, internal emails. I put it all on a flash drive and contacted a journalist. What happened? Before I could meet with her, Mason found out. He worked as a fixer for the company, handling problems that needed to disappear. One night, he and 2 other men grabbed me outside my apartment. They drove me to an abandoned warehouse." Harper's voice broke, and she had to pause to collect herself. Derek wanted to reach across the table and take her hand, but he sensed she needed space to tell this story on her own terms. They wanted the flash drive. I wouldn't tell them where it was. So they decided to send a message that I would never forget. Harper pulled up her pant leg, revealing the surgical scars Derek had noticed before. They didn't just amputate my leg. They butchered it. Mason said if I ever tried to expose the company again, he'd take the other one. And my hands. And anything else I valued. Jesus, Harper. The worst part, Harper's laugh was bitter and broken. My father knew. He signed the paperwork authorizing my medical treatment afterward. He paid the hospital bills. He covered it all up and told everyone I'd been in a terrible car accident. He let them mutilate me, and then he made sure I could never prove what really happened. Derek stood abruptly and walked to the window, his hands clenched into fists. He wanted to put them through a wall. Where's the flash drive now? Hidden. Somewhere Mason will never think to look. We need to get it. We need to expose all of them. No. Harper stood too, her voice rising with panic. You don't understand. Mason has my sister. If I try anything, he'll kill her. Then we get your sister back first. How? He has people everywhere. He's too powerful, too connected. A knock at the door interrupted them. Derek checked the peephole and saw a man in a neat suit, holding a leather briefcase. He didn't recognize him. Can I help you? Derek called through the door. My name is Jonah Briggs. I'm a corporate investigator. I need to speak with Harper Vale. Harper had gone rigid with fear. "Don't open it," she whispered. But something in the man's eyes through the peephole looked earnest, desperate even. Derek made a judgment call and opened the door, but kept the chain lock engaged. "How did you find us?" Derek demanded. "I've been tracking Harper's movements for months, trying to keep her alive long enough to get her to testify." Jonah pulled out a badge identifying him as a private investigator licensed in 3 states. "I know what happened to her. I know about Mason Crowder and BioSync Medical. And I know she is evidence that could bring down a billion-dollar fraud operation." "I'm not testifying," Harper said from behind Derek. Jonah's expression was sympathetic. "I know about Emma. But Harper, if you don't come forward, Mason will never let either of you go. He can't afford to. You know too much. He'll kill her. He might kill her anyway. The only way to save her is to make him so exposed, so publicly scrutinized, that he can't make a move without ending up in prison." Harper shook her head violently. "No, I can't risk it. I won't." Jonah sighed. "Then I can't help you. But you should know, your father is looking for you too. And he's not looking to reconcile." After Jonah left, Harper collapsed onto the couch, her face in her hands. Derek sat beside her, his mind working through possibilities. "Harper, listen to me. Running hasn't worked. Hiding hasn't worked. If we don't take the offensive, Mason wins. And people like him don't stop. They never stop. You don't understand," Harper sobbed. "Emma is all I have left. She's the only family I have who still loves me. Then we fight for her. Together." Harper looked at him through tears, wanting to believe, afraid to hope. "What if we lose? What if we win?" For a long moment, Harper didn't respond. Then, slowly, she nodded. It wasn't confidence or courage. It was exhaustion. She was so tired of running. But they never got the chance to make a plan. The next morning, Harper's burner phone rang. She answered it with shaking hands. "Hello, Harper." Mason's voice was cold and mocking. "Miss me? What do you want?" "I want you to stop playing house with your new boyfriend. I want you to remember who you belong to." There was a pause, then the sound of muffled crying. "Say hello to your sister, Harper." "Harper." Emma's voice came through, terrified and tearful. "Harper, please help me. I don't know where I am. They put a bag over my head and—" The phone was yanked away. Mason laughed. "You have 24 hours to bring me that flash drive, or Emma starts losing pieces. I'll start with her fingers. 1 per hour. After I run out of fingers, I'll get creative. Mason, please." "The clock starts now." The line went dead. Harper stared at the phone in horror, then let out a scream of pure anguish that brought Derek running from the bathroom. "What happened?" Harper couldn't speak. She could only sob, her whole body convulsing with grief and terror. Derek took the phone from her hand and listened to the voicemail Mason had left after hanging up, a recording of Emma crying, begging for help. Derek pulled Harper into his arms while she shook and wailed. "I can't lose her." Harper kept repeating, "I can't lose her. She's all I have." Minutes later, Tiana burst through the door without knocking. She took one look at Harper's devastated face and rounded on Derek. "What did you do?" she demanded. "What did you drag this family into?" "Tiana, not now. Not now. Not now." Tiana's voice rose with fury. "There's a custody hearing in 3 days, Derek. If anything happens to that girl, or to Layla, this is on you. You put us all in danger for someone you barely know." "Emma is 16 years old, and she's been kidnapped," Derek said through clenched teeth. "Show some compassion." "I'm showing compassion for my niece. For your daughter. The one you're about to lose because you can't help yourself from saving broken people." The words hung in the air like poison. Harper flinched as if she'd been slapped. "Get out," Derek said quietly. "Derek, get out of my house. Now." Tiana left, slamming the door behind her. The apartment fell silent except for Harper's ragged breathing. Layla emerged from her bedroom, rubbing sleep from her eyes. "What's happening? Why is everyone yelling?" Derek knelt in front of his daughter. "Something bad has happened to Harper's sister. We're going to help her. Is she okay? We're going to make sure she is." Layla looked at Harper with her wide, innocent eyes. "Daddy, you can't leave Harper alone. Emma needs her." The simple truth from a 7-year-old cut through all the complicated adult fears. Derek felt a rush of love for his daughter, so intense it almost hurt. "You're right, baby girl. Emma needs her sister." Harper tried to compose herself, wiping tears from her face with trembling hands. "I have to give Mason what he wants. I have to trade myself for Emma." "No," Derek said firmly. "That's not a plan. That's suicide." "Then what do you suggest?" "We have less than 24 hours. We work with Jonah. We figure out where Mason is holding Emma, and we get her back." "How?" "We're not soldiers. We're not cops. We're just—" Harper's voice broke. "We're just regular people. Regular people can do extraordinary things when they have to." Jonah Briggs returned that afternoon when Derek called him. He spread papers across the kitchen table: maps, financial records, property deeds. Mason owns several properties around the city through shell corporations. If he's holding Emma, it'll be somewhere isolated, somewhere he controls completely. Jonah pointed to 3 locations circled in red. "These are the most likely candidates." "How do we know which one?" Harper asked. "We don't. Not for sure." Jonah looked at Harper seriously. "But there's something you need to know about Mason and about your father's involvement in all this." "What?" "Your father didn't just cover up what happened to you. He funded Mason's operation from the beginning. Every illegal trial, every forged document, every patient who got hurt, Russell Vale bankrolled all of it. He's not a victim of corporate oversight. He's the architect." Harper's face went ashen. "No, he's greedy and cowardly, but he wouldn't." "He would, and he did." Jonah pulled out a document showing financial transfers from Vale Industries to various offshore accounts controlled by Mason. "Your father hired Mason specifically to handle the problems you created when you started asking questions. Taking your leg wasn't Mason going rogue. It was a calculated decision approved at the highest level." Harper stood abruptly and walked to the sink, gripping the counter as if it was the only thing keeping her upright. Everything she had believed about her father, every excuse she had made for him, crumbled to dust. "Why?" she whispered. "Why would he do that to his own daughter?" "Because you were never his daughter." Jonah's voice was gentle but firm. "I found the adoption records. Harper, you and Emma were adopted as infants. Your biological mother tried to expose Russell's company 25 years ago. He adopted her children to keep her quiet. She died under suspicious circumstances when you were 3. Harper turned to look at him, tears streaming down her face. "He's not my father, not biologically, and based on how he's treated you, not in any way that matters." The revelation broke something in Harper. She slid down to sit on the floor, her prosthetic leg stretched out awkwardly in front of her. None of it was real. My entire life was a lie. Derek moved to sit beside her on the floor. He didn't try to offer platitudes or false comfort. He just sat with her in the wreckage of her shattered world. "Emma is real," he said quietly. "Your love for her is real. Everything else is just noise." Harper looked at him with red, swollen eyes. "How are you so calm about all this?" "I'm not calm. I am terrified. But being terrified doesn't help Emma." After several minutes, Harper pulled herself together. "Okay, we need a plan." They spent the rest of the afternoon and evening strategizing. The custody hearing was scheduled for tomorrow morning, which meant Derek had to choose: appear in court to fight for Layla, or go after Emma and risk losing everything. It wasn't really a choice at all. "I'm going after Emma," Derek said. "The hearing will have to wait." "You'll lose custody," Jonah warned. "Then I lose custody. But I won't lose who I am. And the man I am doesn't abandon a 16-year-old girl when she needs help." Harper grabbed his hand. "Derek, you can't sacrifice your daughter for mine." "I'm not sacrificing anyone. I'm doing what's right and trusting that the judge will understand." Layla had been listening from her bedroom doorway. She walked into the kitchen and stood in front of her father with the solemnity only a child could manage when saying something they believed with their whole heart. "Daddy, you have to help Emma. If you don't, you'll be sad forever. And I don't want you to be sad." Derek pulled his daughter into a tight hug, his eyes stinging with tears. "You're the bravest person I know, baby girl. Will you come back?" "I promise." That night, as they prepared to leave, Harper tried one more time to talk Derek out of it. "Let me go alone. This isn't your fight. You're wrong. The moment you sat down at that table in the cafe, it became my fight too." At 11 o'clock, They received a text on the burner phone. Just a photo, no words. It showed Emma tied to a chair in what looked like a basement or warehouse. Her face was bruised, her eyes terrified, but she was alive. Layla found the phone under the couch where it had fallen earlier, and when she unlocked it, the GPS history was still active. One location appeared repeatedly over the past week: an abandoned warehouse near the industrial docks, exactly where Jonah had predicted. "That's where she is," Jonas said, pointing at the map on his laptop. "That's Mason's primary location." Derek looked at Harper. "Are you ready for this?" Harper's jaw was set with determination. The fear was still there, but something else had joined it: rage. "I'm ready. If anything happens to me," Derek said, "Layla needs you. Can you promise me that? Nothing's going to happen to you. Harper, promise me." She met his eyes, understanding the weight of what he was asking. "I promise. I'll keep her safe." As they prepared to leave, Harper pulled Derek aside one more time. "Why are you doing this?" "Really?" Derek thought about it for a moment. "Because you asked to share my table, and I said yes. Everything that came after, that was me saying yes to your life mattering as much as mine." Harper's eyes filled with tears again, but this time they weren't tears of despair. They were tears of gratitude, of being seen, of being valued after so long believing she was worthless. "Thank you," she whispered, "for everything. Don't thank me yet. We still have to survive the night." At midnight, Derek kissed Layla goodbye and promised her again that he would come home. Tiana arrived, still angry, still disapproving, but unwilling to let Layla be alone, and took up position in the living room like a guard. Derek, Harper, and Jonah climbed into Jonah's car and drove through the empty city streets toward the docks. None of them spoke. They were each lost in their own thoughts, their own fears, their own desperate hopes that this night would end with Emma safe and Mason finally stopped. The industrial district loomed ahead, all rusted metal and broken windows, a graveyard of failed businesses and forgotten dreams. The warehouse sat at the edge of the water, isolated and dark except for a single light glowing in a second-story window. "This is it," Jonas said, parking a block away. "Once we go in, there's no going back." Derek turned to Harper. "Last chance to change your mind." Harper adjusted her prosthetic leg and checked the crutches she had brought. "I'm not changing my mind. That's my sister in there." "Then let's bring her home." They moved through the darkness toward the warehouse. 3 ordinary people walking into a nightmare, armed with nothing but determination and the desperate hope that love could be stronger than fear. Inside that warehouse, Emma waited in the dark, crying softly, praying that her sister would come. She didn't know if Harper even knew where she was. She didn't know if anyone was coming at all. But Harper was coming, and she wasn't coming alone. The hunt was about to become a rescue. And Mason Crowder was about to learn that some people, when pushed far enough, would burn the whole world down to save the ones they loved. After leaving Derek's apartment at midnight, the 3 of them drove through empty streets toward the industrial district. Harper sat in the back seat, her hands gripping her crutches so tightly her knuckles had turned white. Derek kept glancing at her in the rearview mirror, watching her face shift between determination and terror. The warehouse district sprawled along the waterfront like a collection of forgotten monuments to better economic times. Rusted metal buildings stood shoulder to shoulder, their broken windows reflecting the pale moonlight. The smell of salt water and industrial decay hung heavy in the cold night air. Jonah parked his car a full block away from their target location, cutting the engine and the headlights simultaneously. In the sudden darkness and silence, they could hear the distant sound of water lapping against concrete pilings and the occasional groan of metal settling in the wind. "That's it," Jonas said quietly, pointing to a massive warehouse at the end of the pier. 3 stories tall, it loomed against the night sky like a sleeping beast. A single light glowed in an upper window. Mason uses it for storage and other activities he doesn't want traced back to him. Derek studied the building carefully. Security? Cameras at the main entrance. Probably guards inside, maybe 2 or 3. Mason's confident, but he's not stupid. Harper leaned forward from the back seat. "How do we get in without being seen?" There's a loading dock on the south side. The door lock has been broken for months. Mason never bothered fixing it because he figured no one would be stupid enough to break into one of his locations. Then I guess we're stupid, Derek said, opening his car door as quietly as possible. They moved through the darkness like shadows, staying close to the buildings, avoiding the pools of light cast by the few working street lamps. Harper struggled to keep pace on her crutches, and twice Derek had to slow down and wait for her. She never complained, just pushed herself harder, driven by the image of her sister tied to a chair somewhere in that building. When they reached the loading dock, Jonah was right. The door hung slightly ajar, the lock mechanism broken and useless. Derek pulled it open slowly, wincing at every small creak of metal on metal. They slipped inside one by one. The interior of the warehouse was a maze of shadows and abandoned equipment. Old shipping crates sat stacked haphazardly, creating narrow corridors and blind corners. The ceiling stretched high above them, crisscrossed with catwalks and exposed pipes. Water dripped somewhere in the darkness, the sound echoing off the concrete floor. Derek whispered to Harper, "Stay close. Don't make any sudden movements." They moved deeper into the warehouse, their eyes gradually adjusting to the darkness. Jonah led the way, seeming to know the layout better than he should have. Derek noticed, but said nothing. There would be time for questions later if they survived. As they approached a stairwell leading to the basement level, Derek heard something that made his blood run cold. A faint whimpering sound, barely audible, coming from below. Harper heard it too. Her hand shot out and grabbed Derek's arm. "That's her," she breathed. "That's Emma." "Wait," Jonah whispered harshly. "We need to assess the situation first." But Harper was already moving toward the stairs, her crutches clicking softly against the concrete. Derek hurried after her, his heart pounding. This felt wrong. Everything felt wrong. They descended the stairs carefully, each step taking them deeper into the belly of the warehouse. The basement was even darker than the main floor, lit only by a single bare bulb hanging from a wire. And there, in the center of the space, tied to a metal chair with duct tape wrapped around her wrists and ankles, was Emma. She was younger than Derek had imagined, her face still holding onto the last traces of childhood. Her dark hair hung in tangles around her face, and her eyes were swollen from crying. When she saw Harper emerge from the shadows, her expression transformed from despair to desperate hope. "Harper," Emma sobbed. "You came. I knew you'd come." Harper dropped her crutches and hobbled forward, her prosthetic leg moving awkwardly without support. She fell to her knees in front of her sister, her hands shaking as she tried to pull at the tape binding Emma's wrists. "I'm here, baby. I'm here. I'm going to get you out." Derek knelt beside Harper and pulled a pocket knife from his jeans, quickly cutting through the layers of duct tape. Emma's wrists were raw and bleeding where she had struggled against her bonds. "It's a trap," Emma whispered urgently as soon as her mouth was free. "He said you would come. He said he knew exactly what you'd do." The words had barely left her mouth when the lights slammed on, flooding the basement with harsh fluorescent brightness. Derek spun around, instinctively positioning himself between Harper and whatever threat was coming. Mason Crowder stood at the top of the stairs with two men flanking him. He was smaller than Derek had imagined. Average height, compact build, the kind of man you might pass on the street without a second glance. But his eyes were cold and calculating, and he held a gun with the casual confidence of someone who had used it before. "Right on schedule," Mason said, descending the stairs slowly. "I have to admit, Harper, I'm almost impressed. You managed to find someone stupid enough to play hero for you." Derek noticed Jonah standing off to the side, his hands raised, but his expression far too calm, too composed. And then Jonah took a step, not toward Derek and Harper, but toward Mason. "I told you he'd come alone," Jonah said, and Derek felt the floor drop out from under him. Harper's head snapped toward Jonah, betrayal and horror flooding her face. "You're working for him?" "I'm working for the highest bidder," Jonah replied with a shrug. "And Russell Vale pays better than some idealistic crusade for justice." Derek's mind raced, recalculating everything, trying to find an angle, any angle that would get them out of this alive. Mason's two enforcers were armed. The stairs were blocked. They were trapped like rats in a cage. "You know what I want, Harper?" Mason said conversationally, as if they were discussing the weather. "The flash drive. You bring it to me, and I'll let your sister go. Simple exchange." "I don't have it," Harper said, her voice shaking. "It's hidden. I can't get it right now." Mason sighed like a disappointed teacher. "That's unfortunate, because you see, I'm done waiting. I'm done playing games." He gestured to one of his men, who grabbed Emma by the hair and yanked her head back. The girl screamed. "Stop!" Harper cried out. "Please, just give me time. You want the kid?" Mason interrupted, looking at Derek. "Take her." "But the girl, Harper, she comes back with us. Tonight. That's the deal." Derek felt rage building in his chest, hot and consuming. "No deal." Mason's expression didn't change. "Then I guess we do this the hard way." He raised his gun, pointing it directly at Harper's head. Everything happened at once. Derek hurled himself forward, tackling the nearest enforcer. They crashed into a stack of crates, with splintering around them. The man was bigger than Derek, stronger, but Derek fought with the desperate fury of a father protecting his family. Mason fired. The gunshot was deafening in the enclosed space, the bullet sparking off a metal pipe inches from Harper's head. She screamed and threw herself over Emma, shielding her sister with her body. "Stop!" Jonah shouted, panic finally breaking through his cool facade. "Mason, stop. You said no killing. That wasn't the plan." "Plans change," Mason snarled, taking aim again. Derek grabbed a length of pipe that had fallen from the broken crates and swung it with all his strength, connecting with the enforcer's knee. The man howled and went down. Derek didn't stop. He swung again, this time at Mason's gun hand. The gun flew from Mason's grip, skittering across the concrete floor. For a moment, everyone froze, eyes tracking the weapon. Then chaos erupted again. Harper grabbed one of her crutches and swung it like a club, catching the second enforcer in the stomach. He doubled over with a grunt of pain. Emma, her hands finally free, scrambled away from the chair. "Run!" Derek shouted at the girls. "Get to the loading dock. Go!" Emma didn't need to be told twice. She sprinted for the stairs, her young legs carrying her faster than anyone else could move. Harper tried to follow, but her prosthetic leg wasn't made for running. She stumbled, falling hard against the concrete. Mason recovered faster than Derek expected. He dove for the gun, his fingers closing around the grip. Derek threw himself at Mason, and they went down in a tangle of limbs, fighting for control of the weapon. Above them, an explosion suddenly rocked the building. The sound was massive, overwhelming, followed immediately by the roar of flames. The upper floor of the warehouse had ignited, fire spreading with terrifying speed across old wood and accumulated oil. "What the hell?" Mason's words were cut off as smoke began pouring down the stairwell. Someone else was here. Someone had set the explosion. But who? Jonah was already running for the stairs, abandoning Mason without a second thought. The two enforcers followed, more concerned with saving their own lives than completing their mission. In the confusion, Derek managed to wrench the gun from Mason's hand and shove him hard against a concrete pillar. "Stay down," Derek growled, his voice barely recognizable even to himself. He turned to Harper, who was struggling to stand. Without thinking, Derek scooped her into his arms and ran for the stairs. Harper clutched his neck, her crutches left behind in the chaos. The warehouse was an inferno. Flames licked across the ceiling, and thick black smoke choked the air. Derek could barely see, could barely breathe. He followed the wall, trusting his instincts, moving toward where he remembered the loading dock entrance. Behind them, Mason screamed something incoherent, but Derek didn't look back. He burst through the loading dock door into the cold night air, his lungs burning, Harper coughing violently in his arms. Emma stood in the parking lot, safe, tears streaming down her face. And beside her stood a figure Derek hadn't expected to see, Harper herself. No, not Harper. His mind cleared. This woman looked like Harper, dressed in dark clothes, her face illuminated by the orange glow of the burning warehouse. Harper gasped from Derek's arms. "Who?" The woman stepped forward into the light, and Derek finally understood. She was older than Harper, her face harder, but the resemblance was unmistakable. "I'm sorry I'm late," the woman said, her voice rough from smoke. Traffic was terrible. Harper's eyes went wide with recognition and disbelief. "Mom!" The night ended in chaos. Fire trucks screamed toward the warehouse, their sirens wailing. Police cars surrounded the area. Mason and his enforcers were arrested trying to flee the scene, their escape route cut off by the emergency vehicles. Jonah Briggs tried to blend into the crowd of onlookers, but was recognized and detained. Harper sat in the back of an ambulance, an oxygen mask pressed to her face, staring at the woman who claimed to be her mother, a mother she had been told died when she was 3 years old. Emma huddled beside her, wrapped in a shock blanket, refusing to let go of Harper's hand. The woman explained in short, clipped sentences between her own oxygen treatments. Her name was Diana Crawford. She hadn't died 25 years ago. Russell Vale had paid people to make it look like she had, then threatened to kill her daughters if she ever tried to contact them. She had been watching from a distance for years, always staying just far enough away to keep Harper and Emma safe. When she learned about Emma's kidnapping, she had followed Mason's men to the warehouse and decided the only way to save everyone was to create a distraction big enough that Mason couldn't control the situation. "You've been alive this whole time?" Harper's voice was hollow with shock. "All these years. I had no choice," Diana said, her own eyes filling with tears. "Russell would have killed you both. I've been gathering evidence against him, building a case, waiting for the right moment to bring him down. I just didn't expect it to happen like this." Harper didn't know what to feel. Anger, relief, grief for all the lost years, joy at having her mother back. It was too much, too overwhelming. She just held Emma and cried. Derek stood apart from them, talking to the police, explaining what had happened as best he could without fully understanding it himself. The detective taking his statement looked skeptical but wrote everything down. When Derek mentioned Russell Vale's name, the detective's eyebrows rose. "Harper Vale, the CEO?" "The same one. That's a serious accusation, Mr. Coleman." "I know, and I can prove it." But as dawn broke over the city, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, Derek remembered what day it was. The custody hearing. He was supposed to be in court in 3 hours, clean and presentable and ready to fight for his daughter. Instead, he was covered in soot and bruises, his clothes torn, his body aching, standing in front of a burned-out warehouse, having just fought criminals and helped rescue a kidnapped teenager. He called Tiana from the ambulance. She answered on the first ring, her voice tight with worry. "Are you alive?" "Yeah. Emma's safe. Harper's safe. Everyone's okay." "Where are you?" "Still at the warehouse. There was a fire." "It's a long story." There was a long pause. Then Tiana said quietly, "Derek, the hearing is in 3 hours. If you don't show up, I know. Melissa's lawyer will destroy you. They'll say you're irresponsible, that you put yourself in danger, that you're not fit to raise Layla." "I know that too." Another pause. "Do you regret it? Going after Emma?" Derek looked across the parking lot at Harper and Emma, their foreheads pressed together, Diana's hand on both their shoulders. A family broken and now beginning to heal. "No," he said firmly. "I don't regret it at all. Then I'll see you in court, brother, and we'll fight like hell." 3 hours later, Derek walked into the courthouse looking like he'd been through a war. He had stopped at home long enough to shower and change into clean clothes, but nothing could hide the bruises on his face or the exhaustion in his eyes. Layla ran to him the moment she saw him, and he lifted her into his arms, holding her like she was the most precious thing in the world. "You came back," she whispered into his neck. "I promised, didn't I?" The courtroom was cold and sterile, designed to strip away emotion and deal only in facts and law. Melissa sat on one side with her lawyer, a sharp-eyed woman named Patricia Hayes who had a reputation for winning custody battles. She took one look at Derek's face and smiled like a shark scenting blood. The judge, an older black woman named Judge Carolyn Foster, entered and everyone stood. She had kind eyes but a stern mouth, and Derek knew she didn't suffer fools or excuses. "Mr. Coleman," Judge Foster said as soon as the proceedings began, "I understand you were involved in an incident last night at the industrial docks. Would you care to explain why you look like you've been in a fight?" Derek stood. Yes, Your Honor. I was helping rescue a kidnapped 16-year-old girl from criminals who were holding her hostage. The courtroom buzzed with whispers. Patricia Hayes stood immediately. Your Honor, this is exactly the kind of reckless behavior we've been concerned about. Mr. Coleman has been harboring a fugitive in his home. Harper Vale is not a fugitive. A voice interrupted from the back of the courtroom. Everyone turned. Harper stood in the doorway, leaning heavily on her crutches, Emma beside her, and behind them both was Diana Crawford and a woman in a police detective's uniform. Judge Foster raised an eyebrow. And you are? Harper Vale, Your Honor. I'm the person Mr. Coleman helped rescue last night, along with my sister Emma and with the help of my mother, who I thought was dead until 12 hours ago. Harper's voice was steady despite the trembling in her hands. I'd like to testify as a character witness for Mr. Coleman. Patricia Hayes objected loudly, claiming Harper's testimony was irrelevant and prejudicial, but Judge Foster overruled her. Something in the judge's expression suggested she wanted to hear this story. Harper limped to the witness stand and was sworn in. Then, in clear, unflinching detail, she told the court everything. The medical fraud, Mason's attack, the amputation, her father's betrayal, Emma's kidnapping, and Derek's unwavering determination to help someone he barely knew at great personal cost to himself. Mr. Coleman didn't have to help me, Harper said, her voice thick with emotion. He could have turned me away that first day in the café. He could have called the police and let them handle it. He could have focused only on his own problems. But he didn't. He saw someone in trouble, and he chose to help, even when it put his own custody battle at risk. That's not recklessness, Your Honor. That's character. The courtroom was silent when Harper finished. Even Patricia Hayes seemed momentarily at a loss for words. Then the detective stepped forward and addressed the judge. Your Honor, I'm Detective Sarah Morrison. I can confirm that Mr. Coleman's actions last night directly led to the arrest of Mason Crowder, who is wanted in connection with multiple felonies including kidnapping, assault, and conspiracy to commit fraud. He also helped us locate evidence that led to the arrest this morning of Russell Vale, CEO of Vale Industries, on charges of corporate fraud, obstruction of justice, and accessory to assault. Judge Foster leaned back in her chair, studying Derek with new eyes. Mr. Coleman, were you aware that attending a rescue operation would likely cause you to miss this hearing? Yes, Your Honor. And you went anyway? Yes, Your Honor. Because a 16-year-old girl needed help, and I was in a position to provide it. I couldn't live with myself if I had chosen otherwise. Melissa's lawyer stood again. Your Honor, regardless of the nobility of Mr. Coleman's actions, he still deliberately exposed his daughter to dangerous individuals. His home was threatened. Windows were broken. He brought a woman being hunted by criminals into his daughter's life. And he taught her the most important lesson she'll ever learn. Judge Foster interrupted quietly. Patricia Hayes stopped mid-sentence, surprised. The judge continued. He taught her that we help people in trouble, even when it costs us something. That we don't turn away from suffering because it's inconvenient. That character matters more than comfort. Judge Foster turned to Layla, who sat in the front row holding Tiana's hand. Young lady, were you scared when your father went to help Emma last night? Layla nodded. Yes, ma'am. Are you angry at him for going? Layla shook her head firmly. No, ma'am. Daddy had to help Emma. It was the right thing to do. Judge Foster smiled just slightly. Then her expression turned serious as she looked at Melissa. Ms. Coleman, I've reviewed your petition for full custody. I've read the allegations of instability and poor judgment. And I've watched you sit silently in this courtroom while a woman testified about being mutilated by criminals and a detective confirmed that your ex-husband helped bring those criminals to justice. She paused. What I haven't heard from you is any recognition that sometimes good parenting means teaching children to be brave and kind, even when it's difficult. Patricia Hayes tried to object, but Judge Foster held up her hand. I'm not interested in legal arguments right now, Miss Hayes. I'm interested in what's best for this child. The judge shuffled through papers on her desk, then looked up. Mr. Coleman, your actions were unorthodox and certainly complicated, but they weren't reckless. You ensured Layla was safe with family before you left. You worked with law enforcement, and you succeeded in saving a child's life." She took a deep breath. "Based on everything I've heard today, I'm denying Ms. Coleman's petition for full custody. The current arrangement will remain in place, with Mr. Coleman retaining primary custody." Derek felt his knees go weak with relief. Layla let out a small cry of joy and ran to her father. He caught her and held her tight, his eyes closed, silently thanking every power in the universe that might be listening. Melissa stood abruptly and left the courtroom without a word, Patricia Hayes hurrying after her. But Derek barely noticed. He was too focused on his daughter's arms around his neck and the weight of responsibility and love that came with being her father. After the hearing ended, Harper approached Derek in the courthouse hallway. Emma stood beside her, and Diana hovered nearby, still unsure of her place in her daughter's lives, but present nonetheless. "Thank you," Harper said simply, "for everything." "You saved my life too," Derek replied. "That explosion, your mom, if she hadn't acted when she did, we'd all still be in that basement." Diana spoke up, her voice gruff but warm. "You protected my daughters when I couldn't. That makes you family as far as I'm concerned." Emma hugged Derek suddenly, her young arms surprisingly strong. "You're a real hero," she said. "Like in the movies." Derek laughed, ruffling her hair. "I'm just a guy who did what needed doing. The real hero is your sister. She survived things that would have broken most people." Harper's eyes filled with tears again. She had cried more in the past 24 hours than in the previous 3 years combined. But these tears were different. They were relief and hope and the beginning of healing. Over the next few weeks, life slowly found a new rhythm. Russell Vale was indicted on multiple charges, his company seized by federal investigators, his empire crumbling as more victims came forward. Mason Crowder and his enforcers were held without bail, awaiting trial. Jonah Briggs cut a deal, agreeing to testify against everyone in exchange for a reduced sentence. Harper and Emma moved into a small apartment near Derek's place, funded by a victims' compensation fund and the beginnings of a settlement for Vale Industries. Diana stayed with them, helping Emma recover from her trauma and slowly rebuilding a relationship with daughters who were strangers to her. Harper began physical therapy, learning to use her prosthetic leg more effectively, pushing herself to walk without crutches for longer periods each day. She enrolled in online classes to finish the degree she had abandoned years ago. She was determined to rebuild her life from the ground up. Most evenings, Harper and Emma would come over for dinner. Layla had adopted Emma as an honorary little sister, and the two girls would disappear into Layla's room to draw and play while the adults talked. Diana would cook. She was a surprisingly good chef, and Tiana would grudgingly admit that maybe having Harper around wasn't the worst thing in the world. One evening, about a month after the warehouse rescue, Derek and Harper sat on his apartment balcony watching the sun set over the city. Emma and Layla were inside having a tea party. Diana and Tiana were arguing good-naturedly about the proper way to season collard greens. "I never thanked you properly," Harper said quietly, "for believing me when no one else did. You don't need to thank me." "Yes, I do. You risked everything. Your custody, your safety, your daughter's peace. You barely knew me, and you still chose to help." Derek was quiet for a moment, watching the orange and pink streaks paint the sky. "That morning in the café, when you asked if you could share my table, you looked like someone who had been carrying the world on her shoulders for too long. I recognized that look because I'd seen it in the mirror every day for a year. We were both barely holding on, both fighting battles we didn't think we could win. So yeah, I helped you. But you helped me too. You reminded me what kind of man I wanted to be." Harper reached over and took his hand. It was the first time she had initiated physical contact with him, and Derek felt the significance of it. What kind of man is that? The kind my daughter can be proud of. The kind who doesn't walk away when things get hard. They sat in comfortable silence as darkness fell over the city. Inside, Layla laughed at something Emma said, the sound pure and joyful and full of life. "We're going to be okay," Harper said, and it wasn't a question. "Yeah," Derek agreed. "We are." But even as peace settled over them like a blanket, neither of them knew that the final confrontation was still to come. Russell Vale might be in custody, But he had resources and connections that reached far beyond prison walls. And he had one last card to play, a card that would force Harper to face him one final time and decide once and for all whether she would be a victim or a survivor. That reckoning was coming. But for tonight, they were safe. They were together. And that was enough. 2 months after the warehouse fire, Harper received an unexpected visitor at her new apartment. She opened the door to find a well-dressed woman in her 50s holding a briefcase and wearing an expression of barely contained urgency. "Ms. Vale, my name is Catherine Mills. I'm an attorney representing several former patients of BioSync Medical. I need to speak with you about the flash drive." Harper's hand tightened on the door frame. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Yes, you do. And so does your father. He's been making calls from prison, using his connections to track down anyone who might know where that evidence is hidden. If you don't retrieve it soon and get it to the authorities, it's going to disappear forever. He has people on the outside who will destroy it the moment they find it." Harper let Catherine inside. Over coffee, the attorney explained that Russell's trial was approaching, but without the flash drive, the prosecution's case was circumstantial at best. They had Mason's testimony, financial records, and witness statements, but the raw medical data that proved the illegal trials, that was the smoking gun. Without it, Russell might walk free on most charges. "Where is it?" Catherine asked gently. Harper took a shaky breath. "It's in my childhood bedroom, inside my old prosthetic leg, the one I wore right after the amputation. I hid it there before I ran away, thinking no one would ever look in something so personal. But Russell kept my room exactly as it was, like some kind of shrine. The prosthetic should still be there. Then we need to get it. Tonight." Harper called Derek immediately. Within an hour, they had gathered at Harper's apartment. Derek, Harper, Diana, and Catherine. Emma and Layla were with Tiana, safely away from whatever was about to happen. "This is insane," Diana said, pacing the small living room. "Russell's estate has security cameras everywhere, guards patrolling the grounds. Even with him in prison, the place is locked down tight. Do we have another choice?" Harper asked. "If we don't get that flash drive, he wins. Everything we've been through, everything we've survived, it all means nothing if he walks free." Derek studied the map Catherine had brought showing the layout of the Vale estate. "When do the security shifts change?" 2 a.m., Catherine replied. "There's a 15-minute window when the guards rotate and the camera feeds reset. That's our window." "Our window?" Diana looked at the attorney sharply. "You're coming with us? I've been working this case for 3 years. I'm not sitting in a car while you all take the risk." They spent the next few hours planning. The Vale estate sat on 5 acres of manicured grounds in a wealthy suburb of Riverside Heights. The main house was a sprawling mansion with 20 rooms, indoor pool, and enough security to protect a small nation. Getting in would require precision, luck, and nerves of steel. At 1:30 in the morning, they drove through the quiet streets of Riverside Heights in Catherine's car. Harper sat in the back seat, her stomach churning with anxiety. She hadn't been back to this house in 3 years, not since the night before Mason took her leg. The thought of returning made her skin crawl. Derek reached back and squeezed her hand. "We're in this together. You're not alone." They parked 2 blocks away and approached on foot, dressed in dark clothes, moving through the shadows of expensive houses and perfectly trimmed hedges. The Vale estate loomed ahead, its facade lit by tasteful landscape lighting that made it look like something from a magazine cover. Catherine checked her watch. "Security shift changes in 8 minutes. There's a service entrance near the kitchen. The lock is electronic, but I have a bypass code from a former employee." "How did you get that?" Diana asked suspiciously. "Let's just say Russell Vale has made a lot of enemies over the years. Some of them are willing to help." They crept through the darkness to the service entrance. Catherine pulled out a small electronic device and held it against the keypad. Numbers flashed across a tiny screen, cycling through combinations. After 30 agonizing seconds, the lock clicked open. They slipped inside one by one, finding themselves in a mudroom that led to the kitchen. The house was eerily silent, every surface gleaming and perfect. It didn't feel like a home. It felt like a museum, cold and lifeless. Harper led them through the darkened hallways, her memory of the layout returning with unsettling clarity. Past the formal dining room, up the curved staircase, down the hall lined with expensive artwork. Her childhood bedroom was at the end of the corridor, the door closed but not locked. She pushed it open and stepped inside. Nothing had changed. Her bed was still made with the same purple comforter. Her books still lined the shelves. Photos of her smiling, whole, with 2 legs, photos of a girl who didn't exist anymore, covered the walls. It was like walking into a time capsule of her former life. "It's in the closet," Harper whispered, moving toward the walk-in space that had once held more clothes than any teenager needed. In a chest at the back. She found the wooden chest exactly where she remembered it, buried under old sweaters and forgotten shoes. Her hand shook as she opened it, revealing the prosthetic leg she had worn during those first terrible months after the amputation. It had been a basic model, uncomfortable and awkward before she could afford something better. Harper ran her fingers along the seam of the prosthetic until she found the hidden compartment. She pressed, and a small panel popped open. Inside was a tiny flash drive wrapped in a note she had written to herself 3 years ago. "If anything happens to me, this is the truth." "I've got it," she breathed. "Then let's get out of here," Derek said urgently. But as they turned to leave, the bedroom lights suddenly blazed to life. Standing in the doorway, flanked by 2 private security guards, was Russell Vale. He wasn't supposed to be here. He was supposed to be in prison awaiting trial. But somehow, impossibly, he had gotten out. "Hello, Harper," Russell said calmly, as if greeting her after a long vacation rather than a 3-year estrangement. "I had a feeling you'd come back eventually. Some people are so predictable." Harper felt her blood turn to ice. Beside her, Derek tensed, calculating their chances of fighting past 2 armed guards. Diana's hand moved slowly toward her jacket pocket, where Harper knew she kept a small knife. "How are you here?" Harper demanded. "You're supposed to be in custody. Money buys a lot of things, including temporary release for a medical emergency. My lawyers are very creative." Russell's gaze moved to the prosthetic leg in Harper's hands. "I assume you found what you were looking for. The evidence you've been so desperate to preserve." "My evidence, actually, since it was created on my property using my resources." "Evidence of crimes you committed," Catherine said sharply, stepping forward. "Medical fraud, assault, conspiracy. Be careful, Ms. Mills. Making accusations without proof is called slander." Russell's smile was cold and sharp. "And soon there won't be any proof at all." One of the guards reached for the prosthetic leg. Harper jerked it away, holding it protectively against her chest. "Stay back. Harper, don't make this harder than it needs to be." Russell's voice took on a paternal tone that made Harper's skin crawl. "You're my daughter. I don't want to hurt you. Just give me the flash drive, and we can all forget this unfortunate episode. I'm not your daughter." Harper's voice was steel-wrapped in fury. "You adopted me to control my mother. You kept me like a pet, a tool to use when convenient. And when I became inconvenient, you had me mutilated. That's not what fathers do." Something flickered in Russell's eyes. Anger, maybe, or wounded pride. "Your mother was unstable. She would have destroyed everything I built. I gave you and Emma a good life. Private schools, nice clothes, opportunities most children never get. I saved you from poverty. You destroyed us." Harper took a step forward, her fear transforming into rage. "My real mother spent 25 years in hiding because of you. My sister grew up without her. I lost a leg because I tried to do the right thing. You didn't save us. You poisoned us." "Harper," Derek said quietly, warning in his voice. The guards were getting restless, their hands moving toward their weapons. But Harper couldn't stop. Years of pain and fear and helpless anger came pouring out. "You want to know the saddest part? I loved you. Even after everything, part of me still wanted you to be the father I imagined. But you're not. You never were. You're just a man who values money more than people, power more than love. You're empty." Russell's calm facade cracked. "Empty? I built an empire. I revolutionized medical technology. I've helped thousands of people by destroying hundreds of others. That's not helping. That's using people as raw materials for your success." For a long moment, Russell stared at his adopted daughter with an expression Harper couldn't quite read. Then he said something that changed everything. "You're right. I'm not your father. I never wanted to be. Your mother. Your real mother. She was beautiful and idealistic and so incredibly naive. She actually believed she could expose me and walk away unharmed. So I took the only leverage that mattered. I took her children. You and Emma. I told her if she ever spoke about what she knew, I'd make sure you both disappeared." His voice was casual, discussing Harper's kidnapping as if describing a business transaction. "She tried anyway, of course. So I arranged her accident. Or what was supposed to be her accident." Diana made a sound like a wounded animal. "You tried to kill me. I tried to solve a problem. You survived, which complicated things. But you disappeared, which solved them. I raised your daughters as insurance policies. Pawns to be moved around the board as needed." Russell's gaze turned cold and calculating. "And now one of my pawns is threatening to destroy the entire game." Derek moved slightly, positioning himself between Russell and Harper. "You're not taking that flash drive, and you're not touching her again." Brave words from a nobody. Russell gestured to his guards. "Remove them. Take the prosthetic. Use whatever force is necessary." The guards advanced. Derek braced himself for a fight he probably couldn't win. Catherine pulled out her phone, likely calling for help that wouldn't arrive in time. Diana drew her knife, her face twisted with fury at the man who had stolen her entire life. But Harper moved first. She gripped the prosthetic leg like a club and swung it hard through the window behind her. Glass shattered, the alarm system immediately beginning to wail. In the confusion, Harper dropped the prosthetic leg out the window into the garden below. "Go," she shouted. Derek grabbed Harper's hand, and they ran. Diana and Catherine followed, the four of them bursting past the startled guards and racing down the stairs. Behind them, Russell screamed orders, his composure finally breaking completely. They crashed through the service entrance door and into the garden, searching desperately for the prosthetic leg in the darkness. The estate's floodlights were beginning to activate, security responding to the alarm. They had seconds, maybe. There! Catherine pointed to where the prosthetic had landed in a flower bed. Derek grabbed it, and they ran for the perimeter wall, Diana helping Harper keep pace despite her prosthetic leg slowing her down. Gunshots cracked through the night. Mason's guards had been willing to hold back, but Russell's private security had no such restraint. Bullets sparked off the stone wall as they scrambled over it, tumbling into the street on the other side. Catherine's car was where they'd left it. They piled in, Derek behind the wheel, and he floored the accelerator. More gunshots. Then they were around a corner and away, the Vale estate disappearing behind them. Nobody spoke for several minutes, everyone breathing hard, processing what had just happened. Finally, Diana broke the silence. "He tried to kill me. 25 years ago, he actually tried to have me killed. I'm so sorry, Mom." Harper's voice was thick with tears. "I'm so sorry you had to hear that. Don't apologize. I needed to hear it. I needed to stop wondering if maybe I'd misunderstood, if maybe there was some good in him I'd missed." Diana's hands were shaking. "But there isn't. There never was." Catherine pulled out her phone and made a call. "This is Catherine Mills. I need to report an assault and attempted theft at the Vale estate in Riverside Heights. Multiple witnesses, including myself." Yes, Russell Vale was present and gave the orders. "No, he's supposed to be in custody." She listened for a moment. "Thank you. We're heading to the police station now." At the station, they gave statements that lasted until dawn. The prosthetic leg was carefully examined, the flash drive extracted and immediately copied multiple times, the data verified. Every piece of evidence Harper had collected 3 years ago was intact. Raw trial data, falsified reports, internal emails discussing how to hide patient complications, financial transfers showing the money trail. It was enough. More than enough. Russell Vale was arrested again before breakfast, this time charged with witness intimidation, assault, attempted destruction of evidence, and violating the terms of his release. His bail was revoked. His lawyers scrambled, but had no defense. The flash drive made everything undeniable. The trial began 3 weeks later. Harper sat in the front row of the courtroom every single day, Derek on one side and Diana on the other. Emma just behind them with Tiana and Layla. She listened to victim after victim testify about the procedures that had gone wrong, the complications that had been hidden, the lives that had been destroyed by Russell's greed. Mason Crowder had already pleaded guilty in exchange for testifying against Russell. He described in clinical detail how he had been hired to silence Harper, how Russell had specifically ordered that she be made an example of so no other employees would dare speak up. Harper had to leave the courtroom during that testimony, unable to hear the details of her own mutilation spoken aloud. On the fourth day of the trial, Harper was called to testify. She walked to the witness stand on her prosthetic leg, her head high, refusing to show weakness. The prosecutor asked her to describe what she had discovered 3 years ago, what she had tried to do about it, and what had happened as a result. Harper told the truth. All of it. The courtroom was silent as she spoke, her voice steady and clear. When she was done, the prosecutor held up the flash drive. "And this contains the evidence you collected?" "Yes." "Why did you hide it instead of going to the police immediately?" "Because I was afraid. Because Mason told me if I ever spoke about what happened, he would kill my sister. Because I was 20 years old and I just lost my leg and I didn't know how to fight back against someone as powerful as Russell Vale." Harper looked directly at the man who had destroyed her life. "But I'm not afraid anymore. And I'm not 20 years old anymore. I know how to fight now." Russell's lawyer tried to discredit her, suggesting she was mentally unstable, that her testimony was revenge-motivated, that she had a personal vendetta that colored her perception. But Harper didn't break. She answered every question calmly, supported by medical records, witness statements, and most importantly, the cold, hard data on the flash drive. The trial lasted 2 weeks. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours. Guilty on all counts. Russell Vale was sentenced to 35 years in federal prison with no possibility of parole. BioSync Medical was dissolved, its assets seized to create a victim compensation fund. Every patient who had been harmed in the illegal trials received financial settlements. Mason Crowder received 20 years. Jonah Briggs, because he had cooperated, received 8. Harper stood outside the courthouse after the sentencing, surrounded by reporters shouting questions. She ignored them all, turning instead to the small group of people who had fought beside her: Derek, Diana, Emma, Catherine, and even Tiana, who had grudgingly admitted that Harper was pretty tough for someone who looked like a strong wind could blow her over. "It's over," Emma said, disbelief in her voice. "It's really over." "Yeah," Harper agreed. "It's really over." That evening, they all gathered at Derek's apartment for dinner. Diana cooked enough food for an army, insisting everyone needed to eat after the stress of the trial. Layla and Emma set the table, while Tiana opened wine, and Catherine shared war stories from other cases she'd won. As they sat down to eat, Harper looked around the table at the faces of the people who had become her family. Not the family she was born into or the family she'd been adopted into, but the family she had chosen and who had chosen her back. Derek caught her looking and smiled. "What are you thinking about?" "Just that a few months ago, I didn't think I'd survive the week. And now I'm sitting here with people I love, watching my sister laugh, eating my mother's cooking, and actually believing that tomorrow might be okay." "Tomorrow's going to be better than okay," Derek said. "Tomorrow's going to be the start of something good." After dinner, after Emma and Layla had been put to bed and the others had said their goodnights, Derek and Harper sat on the balcony again, watching the city lights twinkle in the darkness. "What are you going to do now?" Derek asked. "With your life, I mean. You spent 3 years running and hiding. Now you're free." Harper thought about it. "I want to finish my degree. Maybe work with Catherine, helping other victims of corporate fraud. I want to make sure what happened to me doesn't happen to anyone else." She paused. "And I want to stay close to you, to Layla, to this life we've built. If that's okay." "More than okay." Derek reached over and took her hand, his fingers warm and solid and real. "You're part of this family now. You and Emma both. That's not changing." Harper felt tears prick her eyes. Good tears this time, the kind that came from happiness instead of pain. "I never thanked you properly for that first day, for letting me sit at your table when I had nowhere else to go. You thanked me by surviving, by fighting, by showing Layla what real courage looks like. Derek squeezed her hand gently. Besides, that table's yours now, too. You never have to ask permission again. 3 months later, on a bright Saturday morning, they all returned to Rosie's family cafe, the place where everything had started. The same booth by the window, the same checkered floor, the same smell of coffee and cinnamon rolls. But everything was different now. Emma sat beside Layla, the two girls giggling over a shared joke. Diana chatted with Tiana about recipes and gardening and all the normal things that normal families discussed. Catherine had stopped by briefly to share the news that 3 more executives for BioSync Medical had been indicted. And Harper sat across from Derek, her crutches leaning against the wall, her prosthetic leg stretched out comfortably under the table. She looked healthy now, her face fuller, her eyes brighter, the shadows of fear and trauma beginning to fade. When the waitress came to take their order, Harper smiled and said, "I'll have what he's having." "You don't even know what I'm ordering," Derek laughed. "Doesn't matter. I trust you." Those 3 simple words, "I trust you," held the weight of everything they'd been through together. The fear and the danger, the courtroom battles and late-night planning sessions, the moment when Derek had chosen to help a stranger and changed both their lives forever. After breakfast, as they prepared to leave, Harper looked at the booth where she'd first approached Derek and Layla. The moment that had changed everything. The moment when she'd been so desperate and afraid that she'd almost kept walking, almost convinced herself that she wasn't worth helping. "Can I ask you something?" Harper said to Derek as they walked toward the exit. "That first day, when I asked to share your table, what made you say yes? You didn't know me. You were dealing with your own problems. You could have easily said the cafe was full or that you wanted privacy. Why did you help me?" Derek thought about it for a moment. "Honestly, because you asked. Because you were brave enough to approach a stranger when you were clearly terrified. Because I saw someone who needed help and I had the power to give it. That's all it takes sometimes, just being willing to say yes when someone asks for help." Harper smiled, her eyes filling with happy tears. "Can we share this table again? Next weekend?" Derek wrapped an arm around her shoulders, pulling her into a side hug. "Harper, you never have to ask. This table's yours whenever you want it. This family's yours. This life's yours. You earned it." They walked out into the sunshine together, Layla and Emma running ahead, Diana and Tiana following more slowly, discussing what to cook for dinner that night. It was ordinary and beautiful and perfect in its simplicity. Harper paused on the sidewalk and looked back at the cafe one more time. The place where her new life had begun. The place where a desperate question, "Can I share this table?" had been answered with kindness instead of rejection. She thought about everything that had happened since that morning. The fear and the pain, yes, but also the love and the healing. The discovery that families could be built as well as born. The knowledge that she was stronger than she'd ever imagined. "Ready?" Derek asked, holding out his hand. Harper took it without hesitation. Ready, and together, surrounded by the people they loved, they walked forward into their new beginning. Not perfect, not without challenges, but whole and hopeful and finally, blessedly free. When someone asks for help, will you have the courage to say yes even when it costs you everything? If you enjoyed this story, please like and subscribe for more inspiring tales of courage, family, and redemption.